is to take warm or room temperature air and change it into cold air and spit it out, right? That's the function of an air conditioner, is to cold air. Cold air is to cool air. It's to make it colder. Aristotle does this totally Aristotle thing. Previously in this course, we've been talking about different moral or ethical theories, like utilitarianism and Kantian deontological moral theory, right? These theories are broadly answers to the following question. What is the morally right thing to do, right? Utilitarianism has one answer. It's whatever thing produces the greatest total of pleasure minus pain. And the Kantian theory has a different answer. Well, the morally right thing to do is whatever doesn't treat a person as a mere means, for example. Okay, but let's say we had an answer to this question. Let's say we could all agree on what the morally right things were, or that at least you settled on some answer to this question. Then there'd be another question, which is, what's so good about morality? Why do we have to do the morally right thing? Why should I do the morally right thing? If I know that the morally right thing is to donate all my money to famine relief, for example, why do I have to do that? What's so good about morality? That's the next question that we're going to try to answer in this course. We're only going to read two answers to this question, but we're sort of putting this one aside for now. We're done with that. We're going to read the answers of two very famous philosophers who are very different from one another, from very different eras of philosophical history. One of them is Aristotle, and the other one is Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. And I'll just tell you up front what their answers are. Why should I do the morally right thing? According to Aristotle, the answer is, well, because the morally right thing, doing the morally right thing, will make you happy. It will make you fulfilled. It will allow you to flourish, given the kind of creature that you are. And of course, you want to be happy. You want to flourish. That's Aristotle's answer. You should do the morally right thing because doing the morally right thing is flourishing for you. Nietzsche's answer is very different. Why should I do the morally right thing? Don't. You shouldn't. Doing the morally right thing is for losers. Do something else. That's Nietzsche's answer. Okay, we're going to get to Nietzsche next time. This video right now is just about Aristotle. We're going to get Aristotle's argument that gets us to the conclusion that doing the right thing just is flourishing or happiness for a human being. Okay, let's start with the conclusion. The conclusion of Aristotle's argument is that happiness or flourishing is, this is the way Aristotle would put it, exercising the virtues. Okay, that's the conclusion. That's where we're going to get to in the end, and Aristotle gives us his argument for this conclusion in Book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics. The first step in the argument happens in Section 2. Here's what Aristotle says. I'm going to read it once all the way through, but it is a very difficult passage and we're going to need to work through it in steps, so then we will go through it more slowly. If there is some end of the things we do, which we desire for its own sake, everything else being desired for the sake of this. And if we do not choose everything for the sake of something else, for at that rate the process would go on to infinity, so that our desire would be empty and vain. Clearly this must be the good and the chief good. Okay, that's from Section 2 of Book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics. This is the first step in the argument to the conclusion that happiness or flourishing is exercising the virtues. Acting in a virtuous way, that's what exercising the virtues means, acting in a virtuous way just is the same thing as being happy or flourishing as a human being. That's the conclusion, and this is the first step in the argument that gets us to that conclusion. Okay, so let's go through it step by step. If there is some end of the things we do which we desire for its own sake. Okay, well, let's start with end of the things we do. So the end of something, as Aristotle is using the phrase, of course this was originally written in Greek, the end of something is the purpose of it, the aim. So if there is some aim of our activities, of our actions, if there's some purpose for our activities, there's something that we're attempting to get which we desire for its own sake. Desire for its own sake. Okay, so we need to talk about what it is to want something for its own sake or to want it for the sake of something else. Take money, for example. Do you desire money? Here's the money. There's the head of somebody, and there's like some money signs. I think that you do. You desire money. If someone offered you money with no strings attached, you would take it. You'd say, oh, thank you very much. This is very nice. I desire it. Give it to me. Why do we desire money? Do we want to have money just for its own sake? Just to have money? No. We want money so that we can do things with it, so that you can spend it, so that you can buy coffee or cakes or jet skis or lake houses or whatever it is that you want to use the money to buy. We don't desire money for its own sake. We desire it to get other things. It's desired, we choose money. If we're given the option, we choose money for the sake of something else. That is, for the sake of the things that we would spend the money on. So money isn't something that we want for its own sake. And actually, the same can be said of all the things that I just mentioned that you would spend the money on. If you would spend the money on, a cup of coffee, well, what's the cup of coffee good for? Is it good to have cups of coffee just to have them? No. Cups of coffee, here, I'll put the, that's the steam coming out of the cup of coffee, right? Cups of coffee are good for drinking. That's what they're good for. If you just have lots of cups of coffee but you can't drink them, then they're no good. You only want coffee for something else, for the drinking of coffee. And the same goes, of course, for like lake houses. Here's your lovely lake house. There's the lake, and it's got, ripples in the water. And there's your lake house. You got a door and a roof, okay? There's a tree next to it. Okay, what a nice lake house. What's having lake houses good for? Well, it's good for going to them and showing them off to your friends and sitting on the porch in the springtime or whatever. It's good for residing in. That's what a lake house is good for. It's good for something else. Money is only good to have because you use it for other things. And the same with coffee and the same with lake houses. All of these things are desired or chosen for the sake of something else. Aristotle is wondering, well, there might be something that we desire for its own sake. Like we want that thing just to have it, and that's it. And once we have it, we're satisfied. We don't use it for something else. Now, we should think about what kind of thing that would be. Like, what thing do we desire for its own sake? We'll get to that in 90 seconds. But first, we need to finish going through this passage. Okay, so if there is some end of the things we do which we desire for its own sake, everything else being desired for the sake of this. So if there's something that we want, right, and we only want that thing just to have it, we don't want to use it for anything else, and all the other stuff that we want, we just want it for that one thing, right? So there's this one thing, this mystery thing, right? And we want that just to have it. And all this other stuff that we want, we only want this other stuff because this other stuff gets us this one thing, right? That's what this says. Everything else, that's all this stuff, everything else. Everything else being desired for the sake of this, for the sake of this one thing that we desire for its own sake, the mystery thing. All right, so if there's something like this, and if we do not choose everything for the sake of something else, that is, if it's not the case that everything else that we choose or desire or want or whatever, if it's not the case that everything is like this, but that there's one thing like this, because if everything was like this, if everything that we wanted, we only wanted it to use to get something else, then Aristotle says, at that rate, the process would go on to infinity. So like, if you only want money to spend on coffee cups, right? Cups of coffee. And if you only want the cups of coffee so that you can drink them and stay awake, and if you only want to stay awake so that you can work really hard and make lots of money, and if you only want that money so that you can buy lake houses, and if you only want the lake house so that you can go there and come up with new plans for how to make more money, right, then this process would go on to infinity. And the desire, that is your desire for money or your desire for coffee or your desire for a lake house, your desire would be empty and vain. If everything was such that we only wanted it so that we could get some other things, then this process would go on forever. It wouldn't stop. There'd be no thing. You wouldn't end at something that you just want for its own sake, right? And the practice of desiring would be, well, pointless, empty and vain. Okay, so far in this sentence, all that Aristotle said is, if there's something that we desire for its own sake, if there's something that we just want, and all the other stuff that we want, we only want that stuff because it gets us this. If there's something like that, then clearly this must be the good and the chief good. So, the good for a human being, the thing that's good for humans to have, is whatever we desire for its own sake. That's the first step in the argument, and that's what Aristotle has said here. Okay, that's the first step in the argument. The good for a person, what's good for a person, is whatever we desire for its own sake. That's step one in the argument to this conclusion. Step two in the argument happens in section 4 of book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics. This was in the reading for today. Aristotle just tells us what this mystery thing is. What is this thing that is good for its own sake? He just tells us what we want for its own sake, and he says that everyone already agrees about this. Everyone already agrees that the thing that we want for its own sake is happiness. Happiness or flourishing, or to use the Greek word, eudaemonia. Everyone already agrees. The one thing that you want for its own sake is happiness. Right, so think about it. You want money just so that you can buy coffee. You want coffee just so that you can drink it. And you want to drink it so that you can stay awake, so that you can make money, so that you can get the lake house, and then you can sit on the porch of the lake house in the springtime and feel happy. Well, why do you want to be happy? So you wanted all those things so that they lead to other things, which ultimately leads to happiness. Why do you want happiness? Satisfaction, fulfillment. Why do you want that? You just want it. It's just good to have on its own. It is something that you desire for its own sake. That's what Aristotle says in section 4, and Aristotle says everyone already agrees about this. Everyone already agrees that the good for a person is whatever we desire for its own sake, and that is happiness. But then Aristotle points out, this is all in section 4, that this agreement is superficial. The fact that everyone already agrees that happiness is the thing that we desire for its own sake is a sort of superficial agreement, because underneath it there is widespread disagreement about what happiness is. What is it to be happy? What is it to flourish as a human being? What is it to be fulfilled? To have eudaimonia? What is that? There's lots of disagreement about that. And so the next task that Aristotle sets himself in this argument towards this conclusion about, well, it's a conclusion about morality, or at least about virtue, the next step in this argument is to figure out what happiness is. So, in order to say what happiness is, Aristotle does this totally Aristotle thing, which is he goes through all of the wrong answers first, the answers that other people hold, and he rejects them and explains why they're wrong. So he considers 4 theories of what happiness is, of what flourishing is. And this all happens in section 5 of book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics. He doesn't number them out, but all 4 of them are in there. So go back and read through section 5, and you'll find the following 4 theories of what happiness is. Okay, here they are. Let's go through each of them and see what Aristotle says to reject these alternative theories. So the first is the theory that happiness is pleasure. Aristotle, his rejection of this, in my opinion, by the way, is the weakest of all of these 4. He just says that thinking that pleasure is flourishing or happiness is suitable for beasts. He just sort of dismisses it as sort of like unsophisticated. This actually can be made somewhat plausible. The idea is just that, look, simple creatures, all that they can hope for in terms of their fulfillment is to feel pleasant feelings. But human beings are capable of greater heights of happiness that's more than just a pleasant feeling, but a sort of deeper, abiding, well, flourishing or satisfaction or whatever. So he dismisses the pleasure theory. Next is honor. What is it to flourish or to be happy, fundamentally or truly happy as a human being? Maybe it's to have a good reputation. Aristotle says this can't be right because something like honor comes from other people, and they could take it away whenever they want. Right? Think about all of the famous, well-respected, popular people that had their popularity stripped away from them very quickly because of what other people thought of them. And maybe they deserved to have that popularity stripped away, or maybe they didn't. But the point is that this sort of thing is under the control of other people. And Aristotle thinks that if you're really and truly flourishing, if you really have eudaemonia, then it's not something that can just be taken away from you from the outside. Okay, the next is possession of virtue. You know, having virtues, like being courageous. Well, what is it to be courageous, for example? It's something like you're courageous if you're the type of person that were you to, be in a dangerous situation where there was something that you could do that's dangerous but that is the right thing to do or something like that, then you would be able to persevere through the fear and danger or whatever and get the thing done. That's courage, is being disposed to act in that sort of way. Aristotle thinks that the possession of virtue, the mere having of these good dispositions or these good traits, that's not flourishing or happiness for a human being because that's compatible with being asleep for your entire life. Right? You could be asleep and still be courageous because courage, just means that you would act a certain way if you were, in the right circumstances. But you might never be in those circumstances. And so he thinks, no, it can't be the mere having of these good qualities that constitutes happiness or flourishing for a human being. So that's why he eliminates 3. And then 4 is wealth. Wealth is the easiest to eliminate. Wealth can't be happiness or flourishing because wealth is not desired for its own sake. You only want money so that you can spend that money on things. Or if you don't want to spend the money, maybe you want to leave it in your bank account and point to it and feel good about how big it is, or show other people how big your bank account is. The point is, you want it for the sake of something else, for the sake of impressing other people, or for the sake of buying jet skis, or whatever. So the wealth theory, that doesn't work either. Okay, well, I don't even have to tell you what Aristotle's answer is. You already know what Aristotle's answer is. What is his answer to the question, what is happiness or flourishing for a human being? We know it's exercising the virtues. That's the conclusion of the argument. It's not merely having these virtuous characteristics like courage or whatever. It's actually being courageous, acting courageously, using your virtues, using them, exercising them. That's what flourishing is for a human being. Okay, that's Aristotle's account. And now we've reached the point, section 7 of book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics, where we get the argument proper for the conclusion. Here's the first thing that Aristotle does. The first thing he does is he sort of repeats this bit, or elaborates on it, or something like that. He explains that, the good for a human being, the good for a human is, well, whatever it's going to be final, and it's going to be self-sufficient. Final just means exactly what we said before. It means that once you have it, you're done. You've got the thing that you needed to get. You don't use it to get something else. And self-sufficient means, well, sort of the thing that we use to eliminate the honor option. Self-sufficient just means that, it is self-contained. It doesn't require something else like the cooperation of other people. They're the ones who need to give you the honor. Okay, so he starts section 7 by just sort of repeating this bit. So whatever it is that's going to be the good for a person is going to be something that's final and something that's self-sufficient. Okay, it's in this part of section 7 that Aristotle sort of like restarts the argument in a certain sense. The good for a creature, the good for something is, it seems on Aristotle's view, associated with the function of that thing. Think about, for example, an air conditioner. An air conditioner has a function. The function of the air conditioner is to take warm or room temperature air and change it into cold air and spit it out, right? That's the function of an air conditioner, is to cold air. Cold air is to cool air. It's to make it colder. Okay, that's the function of an air conditioner. And we can use the function of the air conditioner, its job, its purpose, to figure out what's good for it. Well, what's good for it is just whatever allows it to perform its function. So, what's good for an air conditioner is to have its filter cleaned every 3 months. Do you clean the filter of your air conditioner every 3 months? Having a clean filter is good for an air conditioner, and we know that because having a clean filter lets the air conditioner cool air efficiently. Okay, so now we have a recipe for figuring out what's good for a person. We just have to figure out what the function of a person is. What's the function of a human being? If we can figure that out, then we can just say that, well, the good for that creature is whatever allows it to do this thing. So what's the function of a human being? That's what Aristotle is going to try to say now. And just like before, he's going to go through some of the wrong answers first. The first answer to this question that he considers is nutrition and growth. Is the function of a human being to take in nutrients and to grow? No. Aristotle says that's not the function of a human being because that's something that humans share with plants and animals, other non-human living entities. And so Aristotle is assuming that whatever the function of a human being is, it's going to be distinctive to a human being. It's going to be something that only humans do and that plants don't also do. So he considers another potential function of human beings, and that is perception. By perception, Aristotle just means the using of the senses, sensory perception, so hearing things and seeing things and smelling things. That's something that humans do. Maybe the function of a human being is to smell lots of stuff and to hear the things around it and to see things. No, that can't be it either because although plants don't have perception, animals do. Animals can see and hear and smell. So perception can't be the function of a human being. Okay, well, there's only one possibility left, and this is it. Aristotle says that the function of a human being is some sort of life of action of that part of the soul that has reason. Okay, so it's something to do with the exercise of rationality, because rationality is something that, unlike nutrition and growth and perception, only human beings have. Animals don't have rationality, nor do plants. So, well, this basically gets Aristotle to the conclusion that he wants to reach. Because exercising the virtues, according to Aristotle, just sort of is by definition, using reason. That's all it is. To act virtuously is to act in line with your rationality. So that's how Aristotle gets to this conclusion that happiness or flourishing for a human being is exercising the virtues. Here, let me sort of rewrite the argument like this. Here's the formula. The good for a person or a human being just is performing the activities unique to people well. Because Well, performing the activities that are unique to a type of creature, well, that's just, performing the function of that creature, and performing the function of a creature is what's good for that creature. Well, performing the activities unique to people well, doing it well, means performing the activities involving rationality well, because rationality is the thing that's unique to humans or people. And performing the activities involving rationality well just is exercising the virtues, because the virtues are just defined as dispositions to appropriately use your rational part. Okay, well, we've got some equations here, or whatever, right? This equation shows that happiness, or flourishing, just is what's good for a person. And this one shows that what's good for a person is exercising the virtues. So we put these together, and we get happiness is exercising the virtues. There you go. That's Aristotle's view. That's this. Happiness or flourishing is exercising the virtues. And, well, you may remember that we started all of this out talking about the question, why should I do the morally right thing? Now, Aristotle doesn't really think about morality in the same way that we do, but virtue is the closest thing that Aristotle has to morality as we understand it. So the question, why should you do the morally right thing? Well, that's just like the closest thing we can come to in the Aristotelian way of understanding the world is, well, why should I exercise the virtues? Why should I do the morally right thing? Why should I be virtuous or act virtuously? Why should I exercise the virtues? The answer is because exercising the virtues just is happiness. They're just the same thing. So that's Aristotle's answer. Why should I do the morally right thing? You should do the morally right thing because doing the morally right thing just is happiness. At least, that's what Aristotle thinks. Next time, we're going to talk about what Nietzsche thinks, which is that you shouldn't do the morally right thing because morality is for suckers.